Hello, and welcome to In Focus. Belgium is sitting on nearly 200 billion euros of Russian money, frozen since the invasion began, and Brussels now says it has no objection in principle to putting that money to work for Ukraine. The argument is no longer about whether, it's about who signs for it. And later in the program, a Ukrainian commander that Stalin's agents hunted for years and killed in 1938 was finally reburied in Kyiv. Around 210 billion euros of frozen Russian funds are sitting in Europe, and nearly all of it is parked in a single depository in Brussels. Belgium says it has no objection to spending that money on Ukraine. It just doesn't want to be the only country holding the bill if Moscow comes after it in court. And there was a second conversation going on about drones from Ukraine.
There are no fundamental objections. That was Belgium's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Maxime Prévost's response when asked about the possible transfer of frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. The total amount of Russian funds held under the jurisdiction of European countries is estimated at around 210 billion euros, of which 193 billion euros is held at the Belgian-based Euroclear Securities Depository. Brussels' main condition remains unchanged. All legal, financial, and systemic risks must be shared across Europe.
We have no fundamental objections to using these assets, but the relevant experts need to find a legally sound mechanism that would reduce the risks, so that they do not fall entirely and exclusively on Belgium. I hope the coming months will bring results, but it should not be assumed that Belgium is fundamentally opposed to using the frozen assets or that it does not want to support Ukraine.
Kyiv is calling for negotiations on transferring the frozen Russian assets to Ukraine to resume. They could become a crucial resource for the Ukrainian economy, says Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andrii Sybiha.
We believe the time has come to actively bring the issue of frozen assets back to the table and discuss clear legal mechanisms for using them in Ukraine's interests. It is only fair. According to the World Bank, the damage inflicted by Russia on Ukraine's infrastructure has now exceeded $600 billion. It is difficult for a single country to cope with losses on this scale. Ukraine is currently holding the line, defending the freedom of the whole of Europe and at the same time paying the highest price, the lives of its soldiers.
At the end of 2025, the European Commission proposed that Belgium unblock a €210 billion reparations loan for Ukraine to be financed using frozen Russian assets. Brussels did not take that step at the time. Instead, the European Union chose another option, a €90 billion loan to Ukraine for 2026 to 2027, financed through EU borrowing on capital markets. However, another alternative could now be emerging. Former senior officials from Germany, France, and the United States have proposed transferring Russian assets out of Euroclear and placing them under the management of a new EU structure, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung reports. This would allow responsibility for managing the assets to be shared among EU member states.
By committing aggression, Russia violated all norms of international law. That provides a moral, political, economic, humanitarian, and every other possible basis for Belgium to act decisively and make this decision. So from the standpoint of both politics and international law, there are no problems here.
The partnership between Belgium and Ukraine is strengthening not only in the economic sphere, but also in security. President Volodymyr Zelensky discussed possible dates for signing a drone deal with Maxime Prévost, an agreement on cooperation in drone technologies.
I hope we can put into practice what we discussed and make protection against Russian strikes more effective. Ukraine is also ready to share its experience and expertise and support partners who have stood with us since the beginning of the war. Our teams are currently working on the text of the drone deal, and we discussed possible dates for signing it. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
At the beginning of August, President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukraine had already signed drone deal agreements with 9 countries, while negotiations with another 15 countries were underway. Such agreements provide Ukrainian defense companies with long-term funding, while giving partner countries access to advanced defense technologies and solutions. Reported by Nikita Skoblikov, UATV News.
Our second story is about something Moscow spent a century trying to take away. 100 years ago, Yevhen Konovalets led Ukrainian troops against the Bolsheviks, and when that war was lost, he kept the fight going from exile. Moscow considered him dangerous enough to send an assassin after him in Rotterdam. This week, Ukraine buried him at home.
The remains of Yevhen Konovalets, the first head of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, have been reburied at the National Military Memorial Cemetery in Kiev region. The ceremony was attended by the country's top officials, the President of Ukraine, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, and the head of the President's office. Foreign diplomats and military personnel also arrived to honor the memory of this outstanding Ukrainian statesman and military figure.
Разом з ним Україна повернула частину себе.
Together with him, Ukraine has reclaimed a part of itself, of its national history, the history of all those who, at various times, lived and fought for Ukraine, for our independence and our own statehood. Colonel Yevhen Konovalets is exactly that kind of figure. His fate is both heroic and tragic, like a symbol of that entire period of our history. Konovalets was born at a time when foreign states and empires dominated Ukrainian land. His entire conscious life, he fought so that Ukraine would be reborn and become a real independent power.
Yevhen Konovalets is one of the key figures of the Ukrainian liberation movement. He was a man the Soviet regime sought not only to physically destroy, but also to erase from Ukrainian historical memory. A colonel in the army of the Ukrainian People's Republic, commander of the Sich Riflemen, and the founder and first head of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, he continued the fight for an independent Ukrainian state abroad after the defeat of the Ukrainian Revolution. This is precisely why Konovalets became one of the priority targets of the Soviet secret services. He survived several assassination attempts. On May 23, 1938 in Rotterdam, he was killed by Soviet agent Pavel Sudoplatov. Konovalets was buried at the Krooswijk Cemetery, but that grave was meant to be temporary. It was expected that one day his remains would be returned to an independent Ukraine, and that is exactly what happened.
There are no political debates. There can be no political emotions right now. This is a matter that unites, and this happened precisely thanks to that unifying impulse. All kinds of different groups have gathered here today, regardless of political views. This shows that we are capable of uniting. Things like this demonstrate our capacity to unite, a capacity we're told we don't have. They say we need someone to lead us in order to unite, but that's not true.
The current burial site of Yevhen Konovalets' remains is also temporary. In the future, his remains are planned to be moved to the Ukrainian Pantheon, which will be created on the grounds of the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra National Reserve. According to the head of the Ukrainian Institute of National Remembrance, the remains of Simon Petliura, head of the Directorate of the Ukrainian People's Republic, and Hetman Pavlo Skoropadsky are also to be reburied there. The remains of OUN leader Andrei Melnik and his wife Sofia Melnik are also to be moved to the Pantheon.
We're talking about a pantheon in order to clearly state who will be buried there. Besides Konovalets, that should be Petliura, Skoropadsky, and Melnik. We're talking about the fact that a working group, a commission, will be set up under the pantheon, one that will represent both civil society and academic institutions. Indeed, it has been determined that Konovalets, Skoropadsky, Petliura, and Melnik are the people who will be buried in the pantheon. These are people recognized by society. The pantheon is about unity.
The return of Konovalets' remains to his homeland is the result of extensive work to restore Ukrainian historical memory, and it is precisely this effort that Moscow is trying to discredit. Ukraine's Center for Strategic Communications has recorded around 100 propaganda publications about the reburial. The Kremlin is trying to use the figure of Konovalets to brand modern Ukraine as Nazi. But what the Soviet system tried to destroy and erase from history, Ukraine is now bringing home into its own historical memory. Reported by Nikita Skoblikov, UATV News.
Ukraine is going after the money Russia assumed was untouchable, and after the history Moscow assumed it had erased for good. The Kremlin answered the reburial with about 100 propaganda pieces in a matter of days, which tells you how much it still matters to them. Neither story sounds like a country waiting to see how this turns out. Thank you for watching In Focus. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit a like button and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you in the next one.